At my wedding reception, I saw my mother-in-law slip something into my glass when no one was watching. She thought I'd drink it, but I switched our glasses. And when she raised the toast, I smiled. That's when the real wedding drama began. Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The golden lights shimmered above us, casting a warm glow over the ballroom as soft music drifted through the air. It was the kind of wedding reception people dream about, polished, elegant, filled with laughter and the gentle clinking of champagne glasses. Guests complimented the decor, the food, the music, and most of all, the happiness that radiated from me and Ethan. And for a moment, just a moment, I allowed myself to believe that everything truly was perfect. I'd spent months planning every detail, wanting the day to feel magical, not extravagant, not overwhelming, just beautifully ours. From the white roses lining the tables to the silver ribbon tied around each chair, the entire room felt like a quiet celebration of love, patience, and new beginnings. I remember watching Ethan laugh with his best friend, the way he always did when he was completely at ease, and my heart swelled. This was the man I was choosing forever with. This was the life I was stepping into. But perfection, I've learned, has cracks. Cracks you don't see until the light hits them just right. For me, that crack had always been his mother. Margaret, my soon-to-be mother-in-law, was a woman who carried herself with the kind of rigid confidence that made everyone around her feel slightly inadequate. Sharp features, sharper words, and an unwavering belief that she knew exactly what was best for her son. She'd been polite to me, yes, cordial even, but warm? Never. And as the months passed, her politeness began to feel like a mask stretched too tightly over something simmering underneath. I had tried, truly tried, to win her over. Invitations to coffee, thoughtful gifts, genuine conversations, but each attempt melted into a puddle of subtle dismissals. You two are rushing. Marriage is a big responsibility. Ethan could have chosen someone more suitable. That last word echoed in my mind more times than I wanted to admit. Ethan, bless him, never saw it. He believed his mother simply struggled with change, and I wanted to believe that too. After all, isn't that what family is? Complicated, messy, but ultimately loving. But tonight, at my own wedding reception, her presence felt different. She wasn't smiling, not really. She observed everything with a tight expression, like someone critiquing a performance she disapproved of. Whenever anyone complimented me or mentioned how flawless the ceremony was, I noticed the little twitch in her jaw, the way her eyes hardened just slightly. And yet, I brushed it aside. It was my wedding day. I refused to let tension cloud the celebration I'd waited so long for. So I focused on Ethan, on the joy of our first dance, on the sweet speeches from friends, on the laughter that filled every corner of the room. I convinced myself that this was the beginning of healing between Margaret and me, that the beauty of the night might finally soften whatever invisible wall stood between us. But I was wrong, because somewhere between the toasts and the music, a moment unfolded, small, quiet, and almost unnoticeable, that would shatter the illusion of perfection I'd built so carefully. A moment that would turn a beautiful wedding night into a story people would talk about for years. And it all began with a single glass. It happened so quickly, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. I'd stepped away from Ethan for just a minute, one single minute, to thank the event manager for adjusting the lighting. When I turned back toward our table, weaving between laughing guests and swirling dresses, my eyes landed on something that turned my blood cold. Margaret was standing at my seat, not near it, not passing by. She was leaning over it. Her posture stiffened when she heard footsteps behind her, but she didn't look up. Instead, she kept her gaze locked on my champagne glass. my untouched, perfectly chilled champagne glass, resting right beside my plate. The music swelled at that exact moment, drowning out the faint clink of glass against glass, but I saw her hand move. Quick, purposeful, precise. Something small slipped from her fingers into the drink. A tiny drop, a flicker of motion, so subtle anyone else might have missed it. But not me. I stood frozen, hidden by a group of guests laughing loudly behind me. The lights above caught the faint shimmer in the liquid, and for a breathless second, time stretched thin. My pulse thudded in my ears as Margaret straightened, smoothing her dress like she hadn't just done something unthinkable. Then she stepped back, her expression settling into a practiced smile. A smile so calm, so confident it made my stomach twist. She thought no one had seen. She thought her little secret had dissolved neatly into the golden champagne. My fingers trembled as I pressed them against the tablecloth beside me, suddenly anchoring myself in a moment that felt too surreal to be real. Why would she do that? What could she possibly want to put in my drink? This wasn't a dramatic movie scene. This was my wedding reception. My wedding. Why would a mother, on her own son's most important day, risk humiliating his bride? A dozen thoughts crashed through my mind, each more frantic than the last. Had she planned this? Had she brought something with her? Was this why she'd been so unusually quiet during the ceremony? Margaret moved away from the table with a satisfied lift of her chin, disappearing into a small cluster of relatives who greeted her warmly. She laughed with them. Genuine laughter, as if she hadn't just slipped something into my glass, as if she hadn't just crossed some invisible line neither of us could ever step back from. My breath felt trapped in my chest. I watched her blend effortlessly into the room, the picture of dignified elegance while inside me a storm gathered. The music, the dancing, the chatter, all of it faded into a dull hum as one undeniable truth settled like ice in my veins. Something was wrong, very wrong. And whatever Margaret had planned, it was meant for me. But she didn't know I had seen everything. Not yet. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. From across the room, Margaret laughed gracefully with a group of relatives, her posture relaxed, her hands folded neatly in front of her, like a woman who had done absolutely nothing suspicious, nothing wrong, nothing that could shatter a wedding night. But I had seen. And the longer I watched her, the more my mind spun, dragging me through memories I hadn't invited. This wasn't random. This wasn't impulsive. Margaret was many things. But careless? Never. I remembered the first time I met her, a polite smile stretching across her face, but her eyes distant, evaluating, measuring, as if she was tallying every flaw I carried, deciding whether I was worthy of the son she adored. I remembered the stiff hugs, the forced conversations, the veiled comments. Marriage changes a man, sometimes for the worse. You seem different from the women Ethan usually dates. I suppose Ethan sees something in you. Little jabs hidden inside polite sentences. Then there were the bigger things. The way she'd insisted on helping with wedding planning, only to question every decision I made. The way she'd asked Ethan if he was certain about our relationship just 1 month before the proposal. The way she'd pulled him aside after our engagement party, whispering something that made his expression falter for a split second. But slipping something into my glass on my wedding day? That crossed a line even she had never approached before. My thoughts raced in spirals. Was it something harmful? No, Margaret was controlling, not violent. She cared too much about public image to do anything dangerous. But would she humiliate me? Absolutely. She had tried it before, small, subtle acts that she could wave off as misunderstandings. Perhaps this was another attempt, something to make me look foolish, make me slur my words, stumble during the toast. My stomach twisted. She wanted me to embarrass myself, in front of Ethan, in front of our families, in front of everyone. She wanted to prove a point, that I wasn't fit for him, that I wasn't poised enough, that I couldn't handle the pressure of being part of their family. The realization cut deep, not because it was new, but because it made perfect, painful sense. As I watched her moving gracefully through the crowd, accepting compliments with a gracious nod, a chilling clarity settled over me. Whatever was in that glass, whatever she had planned, was intentional, calculated, and meant to destroy my dignity. But Margaret didn't know the most important part yet. I wasn't going to drink it. And for the first time that night, I felt the power shift. I stood there, hidden in plain sight, trying to steady my breathing as the truth settled over me like a heavy veil. Margaret had slipped something into my glass. Whatever her intention was, embarrassment, sabotage, humiliation, it didn't matter. What mattered was what I did next. Panic wanted to rise inside me, but something else rose faster. Clarity. Control. If Margaret thought she was the only one capable of playing quietly, subtly, strategically, she was mistaken. I smoothed the front of my dress, lifted my chin, and walked back toward our table with the same calm elegance expected of a bride on her wedding night. No one, not a single guest, suspected that my heartbeat sounded like a war drum beneath the lace. Margaret was still mingling across the room, her back turned to me. Perfect. I reached the table and paused just long enough to glance at the champagne flute she had tampered with. Nothing looked different. No strange color, no bubbling, no scent. It shimmered under the chandelier like any other celebratory drink. But I knew better. My fingers hovered over the stem of the glass. Just one touch made my stomach tighten. This was supposed to be the drink I raised during the toast, the moment every camera turned toward me, every eye focused on my face. She had chosen her timing well, but so had I. With a breath so small it barely existed, I picked up the tainted glass, not with fear, but with purpose. Beside it sat another flute, Ethan's mother's glass, half full, untouched, identical, and in the space of a single heartbeat I switched them. No hesitation, no theatrics, no one noticing. One glass shifted slightly to the right, the other slid into its place, silent, seamless, invisible to everyone except me. A strange calm washed over me the moment it was done. Not triumph, no, it wasn't that, but an odd sense of balance, like a scale finally tipped to where it belonged. I sat down, adjusting the train of my dress, pretending to admire the centerpiece. My hands looked steady, even though I could still feel the echo of adrenaline pulsing through them. I glanced once more at Margaret. She hadn't turned around. She didn't have a clue. But the universe must have sensed my small victory, because just then, Ethan walked back toward me, smiling, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the elegant surface of the night. "There you are," he said, slipping an arm around my shoulder. "They're about to start the toasts. Ready?" I forced a warm smile. More than ready. As guests clapped and glasses were lifted around the room, Margaret finally returned to the table, gracefully taking her seat. Her perfectly manicured fingers reached for the flute now resting in front of her. My flute, the one she thought she had prepared for me. She lifted it confidently, unaware that she was holding the very trap she had set. And when our eyes met for just a fraction of a second, I smiled. The kind of smile that disguises the moment everything is about to change. The room gradually fell into a hush as the DJ lowered the music and the best man tapped his glass with a spoon. Laughter softened into murmurs. People turned toward the center of the ballroom, faces glowing beneath the chandelier's warm light. It was time for the toasts, one of the most anticipated moments of the night. Margaret lifted my champagne flute with elegant precision, her fingers circling the stem like she was posing for a photograph. She didn't rush. No, she savored the moment, as if she was confident everything was unfolding exactly as she intended. I watched her like a hawk, my breath shallow. The best man began his speech with a joke about Ethan's terrible cooking, and everyone laughed, even Margaret. But as the laughter faded and he launched into heartfelt stories, my attention stayed glued to her. She tilted her head, smiling politely. She raised the glass closer to her lips. My pulse spiked. Every inch of me tensed as she inhaled, preparing to take her first sip. Then, she did. A small, dainty sip. The kind a woman takes when she's trying to maintain grace while eyes are watching. She lowered the glass and dabbed her lips with a napkin, completely unaware of the invisible shift taking place inside this carefully curated evening. The best man finished to roaring applause. Glasses clinked, cameras flashed. Then it was Margaret's turn. She stood, smiling broadly, the picture of proud motherhood. Her voice rang across the room with practiced confidence. "I'd like to say a few words about my son and his beautiful new wife." The crowd cheered, expecting something sweet, sentimental, maybe even emotional. But as she continued speaking, a curious change washed over her features. Everett at first, a soft unfocusing of the eyes, a tiny stumble over a word. She blinked rapidly, swallowing once, then twice. Her fingers tightened around the flute. "And I've always believed that marriage is... She paused. A murmur rippled through the ballroom. Ethan frowned, confused. I kept my expression neutral, though inside my heart hammered like a trapped bird. Margaret tried again, lifting her glass for another sip as if that would steady her. But her hand trembled, barely, but enough for me to notice. Her smile faltered. "Marriage is a big responsibility," she said, her voice wobbling strangely. Guests exchanged glances. Something was off, very off. She blinked again, slower this time, her gaze drifting unfocused across the room. The mother-in-law, who always held her composure like a shield, was visibly slipping, and, with every passing second, the trap she'd set for me tightened quietly around her instead. The chaos hadn't erupted yet, but the cracks had begun. Margaret's eyes darted from face to face, as if she suddenly couldn't remember who these people were or why they were all staring at her. The ballroom, moments ago filled with admiration and applause, now hummed with confusion. Guests shifted in their seats, whispering behind hands and napkins as Margaret swayed ever so slightly, gripping the back of her chair for balance. Ethan took a step toward her, concern flashing across his face. "Mom, are you okay?" he asked softly. But she didn't hear him, or maybe she did and simply couldn't process the sound. Instead, she blinked rapidly, forcing a tight, strained smile onto her lips. I'm perfectly fine," she declared, though her voice wobbled like a table with a broken leg. She tried continuing her speech. The thing about marriage is, well, it's..." Her eyes drifted upward toward the ceiling, as if the right words were hiding in the chandelier crystals. "It's beautiful, and also very, very spinny." A few guests chuckled awkwardly, thinking she was making a joke, but the laughter died instantly when Margaret suddenly hiccuped, loudly, and pressed a hand against her chest in surprise. "Spinny?" My pulse thudded. Had she really planned to make me seem drunk or unstable in front of everyone? Had she really wanted me to stand up here slurring words and embarrassing myself, with videos that would live online forever? And now she was the one wobbling on her feet. Margaret tried again, gripping the microphone stand for support. "When Ethan was little," she began, but her voice cracked, he always wanted things to be perfect. Just like tonight. Yes, perfect." Her smile stretched unnaturally wide. But sometimes perfection is an illusion. My breath caught. Was that meant for me? A final jab, even while she was unraveling. But before I could think deeper, Margaret stepped backward. Too far. Her heel slipped off the base of the stage platform and she stumbled. Gasps shot through the room. Ethan lunged forward just in time, catching her elbow before she toppled. "Mom," he whispered urgently. "Sit down, you're not well." She waved him off, her movements exaggerated and unsteady. "Nonsense," she muttered, her words stretching like warm taffy. "I'm fine. I just need another sip." She lifted the champagne flute again, but her hand trembled so violently the liquid nearly sloshed over the rim. "She shouldn't drink more," whispered one woman in the front row. "Is she drunk?" murmured another. "She never drinks," someone else replied. "Ever." Their whispers spread like wildfire. Margaret's cheeks flushed bright pink as she blinked at the room, confused by the eyes watching her. She opened her mouth, tried to speak, but only a soft, breathy laugh escaped, a laugh that didn't sound like hers. "That's enough," Ethan said firmly. He took the glass from her hand and set it aside. Margaret stared at him, her expression twisting with something between frustration and panic. "Give that back," she slurred. It's mine." No one was laughing now. The pristine, elegant mother-in-law, the woman who prided herself on control, composure, and dignity, was unraveling in front of 100 guests, and I couldn't tear my eyes away, because the shift had begun. The consequences of her own plan were spreading through her body, inch by inch, and the worst part? She still had no idea the disaster she'd intended for me was now swallowing her whole. Ethan guided his mother back into her seat, his jaw tight, his brows twisted with worry. Guests tried to look polite, pretending not to stare, but the tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. Margaret dabbed her forehead with a napkin, blinking hard as if she were trying to shake herself awake from a dream gone wrong. Ethan straightened and turned toward me, his eyes locked onto mine, not with suspicion, but with pleading confusion. "What's happening?" he whispered, stepping close enough that only I could hear him. "She's never acted like this. She barely drinks. Did something happen? Is she sick?" My heart clenched. This was the moment I dreaded and prepared for. I forced a gentle expression, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not sure. She doesn't look well." He ran a hand through his hair, glancing back at her. "Something's wrong. I've never seen her like this." His voice dropped even lower. "Do you think she took something? Medication, maybe?" Medication, if only. But I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. Not yet. Not without unraveling the entire truth in front of 100 listening ears. And certainly not while Margaret still sat there, swaying slightly, completely unaware of the storm she had triggered. Ethan noticed my hesitation. His eyes narrowed slightly, not accusing, but searching. "Hey," he murmured, touching my arm. "Are you okay? You look tense." Of course I looked tense. I had watched his mother slip something into my drink. I had switched the glasses, and now she was the one unraveling in front of our families. But how could I explain that in the middle of our wedding reception, without evidence, without context, and without turning the happiest night of our lives into a public war? "I'm fine," I said softly. "Just overwhelmed. It's been an emotional day." He exhaled, nodding slowly, accepting my answer for now, but the crease in his forehead remained. Behind him, Margaret suddenly giggled, a strange, airy sound that didn't belong to her. She reached for her silver clutch, missed, then laughed again as if it were the funniest thing in the world. Ethan flinched. "That's it," he muttered. "I'm calling the doctor. Something is very wrong." Before he could move, Margaret spoke loudly enough for several guests to hear. "Don't make such a fuss, Ethan. I'm perfectly floaty." Floaty. Gasps rippled. Ethan's worried gaze snapped back to me. "I need to understand what's going on," he whispered urgently. "If you know anything at all, please tell me." I swallowed hard, because the truth was sitting on the tip of my tongue. But the moment to reveal it hadn't arrived, not yet. The night still had more secrets to unravel. While Ethan hovered beside his mother, torn between panic and embarrassment, I felt a soft tug on my wrist. I turned and saw my maid of honor, Lila, her eyes wide with urgency. "Come with me. Now," she whispered. Without waiting for an answer, she led me through the crowd, past confused guests, past the buffet table, past a group of bridesmaids whispering anxiously. She didn't stop until we reached a quiet hallway just outside the ballroom. The door closed behind us, muffling the noise. I finally spoke. "Lila, what's going on?" She looked around to make sure we were alone, then leaned in. "I saw something earlier, something about your mother-in-law." My breath caught. Lila continued, talking fast as if each second mattered. "When you walked away from the table earlier, I noticed Margaret hovering near your seat. She kept checking over her shoulder, really sneaky, so I watched her." My chest tightened. "And?" Lila swallowed. She pulled out a tiny vial from her purse. "Clear liquid. She poured some into your champagne glass." A cold wave washed through me. Even though I already knew, hearing someone else confirm it made everything real. "What was it?" I asked, barely breathing. Lila hesitated. At first, I thought it was something dangerous, but I followed her when she went to the restroom. She didn't see me behind her. Lila lowered her voice. "I overheard her on the phone." "On the phone? With who?" "I don't know, but she said she bought a speech enhancer." That's what she called it. Something to make you loosen up, ramble, maybe stutter, sound drunk. Humiliation. That had been the goal all along. Not harm, not injury, just pure, calculated shame. The kind you don't live down at your own wedding. I felt both relief and fury twist inside me. Relief that she hadn't intended something dangerous. Fury that she still intended to ruin me. In front of Ethan, in front of our families, in front of our entire future. "She wanted people to laugh at you," Lila said gently, "to think you couldn't handle your own wedding toast." A sharp ache formed behind my ribs. "Why would she do that?" "Because she thinks you're not good enough for Ethan," Lila sighed. "She said it. Said this would show everyone what kind of girl he's marrying." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the truth sink in. Margaret hadn't acted out of panic or jealousy in the moment. She had planned this. She brought something with her. She waited until the perfect moment. "And when she walked away," Lila said softly, "I tried to warn you, but people kept pulling me aside." "It's okay," I whispered. "I saw her." Lila's eyes widened. "You did?" I nodded slowly, and I switched the glasses. Her lips parted. "So she's the one." "Yes," I said quietly. "Whatever she meant for me is happening to her." Lila let out a long exhale. "Then this is far from over." And she was right, because while we stood in the quiet hallway gathering truths, the chaos inside the ballroom was only beginning to unfold. When Lila and I stepped back into the ballroom, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. Moments ago, it had been elegant chaos, music, laughter, clinking glasses. Now it felt like a fragile bubble ready to burst. Margaret sat slumped in her chair, fanning herself wildly with a napkin. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes glassy. Ethan knelt beside her, speaking in a low voice that she clearly wasn't processing. A cluster of guests hovered nearby, whispering behind their hands. Others watched openly, curiosity overpowering politeness. Then Margaret suddenly stood. Just stood. Too fast. Too unsteady. She wobbled, caught herself on the table, and let out a breathy laugh that chilled me. "Oh, everyone needs to relax," she declared loudly. "It's a wedding, not a funeral." Every conversation halted. Heads turned. Ethan froze. "Mom, please sit." But she waved him off dramatically. "I said I'm fine. Better than fine. I'm finally telling the truth tonight." A murmur rippled through the guests. Truth? My heart thudded as Margaret lifted her empty champagne flute like it was a spotlight. You all think this marriage is perfect, don't you? She slurred. But some of us actually have concerns. Ethan's face drained of color. Mom, stop. She didn't. She pointed a wobbly finger toward me. I mean, really? She's sweet, sure, but she's not what I wanted for him. Gasps fluttered like startled birds through the crowd. My stomach tightened. Margaret continued, her words unraveling faster than she could control. I tried. I really tried to give her a chance, but she's not polished enough, not graceful, not from the right background. A few older relatives exchanged knowing, uncomfortable looks. Someone whispered, "Is she actually saying this out loud?" Margaret pushed on, her voice growing louder. "And don't even get me started on her family. I mean, her mother cried at the engagement party. Cried! Who does that? So dramatic!" Lila stepped forward instinctively, but I held her back. Let Margaret talk. Let her expose herself. Ethan, however, was done. "Mom, enough!" he snapped, grabbing her arm. Gently but firmly, she jerked away from him, nearly tripping. "Don't you raise your voice at me," she slurred, eyes unfocused. "I did everything for you, Ethan. Everything. And now you're marrying her." The room erupted, people talking at once, some trying to intervene, others pulling out their phones, relatives rushing to hush the growing scene. It was no longer a whisper of scandal. It was a full-blown public meltdown. The humiliation she had planned for me had come for her instead, and the night was spiraling far beyond anything she or I could have imagined. Ethan stood frozen, his hand still hovering near his mother's arm, as if torn between helping her and stepping away entirely. His eyes, usually warm, steady, patient, were now wide with a mixture of disbelief and heartbreak. For years, he had defended Margaret's sharp comments, her controlling tendencies, her manipulative concerns. He always insisted she meant well, but now he saw everything. "Mom," he said quietly, "you need to sit down." Margaret swung toward him, nearly losing her balance again. "Don't talk to me like that. I'm your mother. I deserve respect." "Respect is earned," someone in the crowd murmured. Margaret heard it. Her head snapped in that direction, but her vision was too blurred to pinpoint the voice. She pressed her hand to her forehead. "This room is spinning. Who turned the lights up so bright? They're blinding." She squinted at the chandeliers like they were attacking her. Ethan stepped in front of her, concern deepening. "Mom, did you take something? Medication? Did someone give you—" "No," she barked, though her voice cracked. "I'm perfectly fine. I just wanted to make sure everyone knows the truth." Her gaze drifted to me and her expression twisted, resentful yet vulnerable in a way I had never seen. She's not who I imagined for you. I wanted someone different." The crowd stiffened. Even her closest friends looked away. Ethan took a slow, shaky breath. "Mom, how could you say that? Tonight of all nights?" Margaret laughed, a thin, brittle sound. "Because it's true. I tried to warn you. You never listen. You never—" "Warn me?" Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "Warn me of what? That I'm happy? That I'm marrying a woman I love? That I finally built something for myself instead of following every rule you set?" Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. For once, Margaret was speechless. He continued, voice trembling now, not with anger, but with clarity. "You've controlled everything my whole life, what I should study, where I should work, who I should date, and I let it slide because you're my mom." His voice cracked. "But this, sabotaging my wedding?" A wave of murmurs spread. Margaret swayed. "I didn't sabotage anything," she insisted, the words slurring together. I just wanted people to see who she really is." Ethan stared at her as if seeing a stranger. Then he glanced at me, and in that moment something shifted in him, something deep, something irreversible. He turned back to his mother. "Enough," he said softly but firmly. "You don't get to weaponize tonight. You don't get to humiliate her, or me." Margaret's face contorted between confusion and wounded pride. "I was only protecting you," she whispered weakly. "From what?" he asked. "Happiness?" The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in his life, Ethan had chosen a side, and it wasn't his mother's. The ballroom, once warm with celebration, had transformed into a battlefield of whispers and shifting loyalties. Music no longer played. The toasts were forgotten. Every guest was now part of the fallout from Margaret's unraveling confession. Some guests rushed toward Ethan, offering sympathy. Others hovered near Margaret, unsure whether to help her or distance themselves. A few simply watched like spectators at a play they never expected to see. I stood still, my fingers loosely clutching the edge of a chair, trying to steady myself. I hadn't said a word, not one. I hadn't needed to. Margaret had spoken enough for both of us. An older aunt approached me carefully. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "are you all right?" I managed a polite smile. "I'm fine." Her eyes softened with pity, but there was something else. Respect. "You handled yourself with grace. More grace than many would." Across the room, Margaret was slumped back in her chair, her lipstick smudged, her hair slightly undone, her expression a muddled combination of humiliation and denial. A few relatives tried comforting her, but even they exchanged uneasy glances. The perfect image she'd cultivated for years was cracking, and everyone could see straight through it. "Someone should take her home," one guest muttered. "No, let the doctor check her," another insisted. "She shouldn't have drunk that much," someone whispered, only to be corrected. "She never drinks. Something is off." If they only knew. Meanwhile, Ethan stood in the center of it all, rubbing the back of his neck, visibly torn between anger, confusion, and heartbreak. Guests approached him, offering conflicting advice. "Don't let this ruin your night. She needs medical attention. You have to protect your wife. She didn't mean it. She absolutely meant it." Their words collided like chaotic waves around him. And then, their attention shifted to me. A woman from Ethan's family, someone who had once been cold toward me, walked over with a tight, apologetic expression. I misjudged you," she said softly. "After what she said, after how you stood there without reacting. I see now you're stronger than she ever gave you credit for." Another nodded in agreement. "And kinder." I swallowed, hard, feeling the weight of every eye on me. This wasn't the wedding I imagined. It wasn't the night I had dreamed of. But for the first time, people were seeing the truth. Not Margaret's version, but the real one. Lines were being drawn quietly across the room. Some sided with tradition, sympathy, and loyalty to Margaret. But most were siding with me. Not because I fought, but because I hadn't needed to. Margaret had exposed herself. And now everyone was choosing who they believed and who they respected. For several long seconds, I remained perfectly still, letting the murmurs wash over the room like a tide that hadn't yet decided whether to rise or retreat. The ballroom felt suspended, caught between crisis and continuation. Guests stood uncertainly, some glancing at the door as if wondering whether the night was over. But it wasn't over. Not for me. Not for Ethan, not for the reason we were all gathered here. This was still our wedding, and I refused to let Margaret's chaos become its defining moment. I took a slow breath, lifted my chin, and stepped forward onto the small platform where the toasts had begun. The microphone sat abandoned on the stand, tilted awkwardly from Margaret's earlier stumble. I straightened it gently. A hush fell immediately. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, some sympathetic, some stunned, some embarrassed on my behalf. Ethan looked up sharply, worry flickering across his expression. I offered him a small, reassuring smile. Then I spoke. "Tonight didn't go the way any of us expected," I began, my voice soft but steady. "Weddings rarely do, if we're honest. Something always goes off script. Flowers wilt, dresses wrinkle, someone forgets their speech. A few people chuckled nervously. But the truth is, I continued, real love isn't measured by how perfect a night looks. It's measured by how we navigate the imperfect moments together. The room grew still, every whisper silenced. When I walked down the aisle today, I wasn't hoping for a flawless wedding. I was hoping for a strong marriage, one built on honesty, patience, and kindness. And those are things we all have to choose, every day, even when it's hard. My eyes drifted gently toward Margaret, not accusing, not vindictive, simply acknowledging. Families, too, aren't perfect. We all come with our own fears, insecurities, histories, and sometimes those lead us to act in ways that hurt others. But growth, I said softly, is always possible, and forgiveness begins with truth. Several guests lowered their heads, as if absorbing something deeper than a simple wedding message. I continued, "Tonight may not have been flawless, but it has been honest, and honesty, painful as it can be, is often the first step toward healing." Ethan's eyes glimmered, not with embarrassment or regret, but with something warm, something grateful. "So," I said with a small smile, "let's choose to remember not the stumble, but the strength that followed. Not the chaos, but the love that brought us here in the first place." The crowd exhaled collectively, like they'd been holding their breath without realizing. And most importantly, I lifted my glass, my real glass poured fresh by the staff. Let's raise a toast to imperfection, to love, to honesty, and to new beginnings. The guests lifted theirs, some wiping tears, others nodding with admiration. "To new beginnings," they echoed. Ethan stepped onto the platform, slipped his hand into mine, and kissed my knuckles gently. "That," he whispered, "was the moment I fell in love with you all over again." And in that instant, the room transformed, not back into perfection, but into something better, a place where truth had been spoken, dignity reclaimed, and the bride, quiet, steady, resilient, had taken back the night. After the applause faded and the music slowly resumed, Ethan gently guided me off the platform. For a brief moment, we simply held each other's gaze, his full of remorse for what had unfolded, mine filled with quiet reassurance. But then he looked toward his mother. Margaret sat slumped in her chair, shoulders drooping, her earlier fire extinguished into a dull flicker of confusion and shame. A couple of relatives hovered beside her, whispering about calling a doctor or getting her water. She waved them off weakly. Ethan exhaled deeply. "I need to talk to her," he murmured. "I know," I said. "Go." He brushed a kiss against my forehead before walking toward her. I remained a few steps behind, not close enough to intrude, but close enough to hear. He knelt beside her chair again, but this time his posture wasn't anxious. It was resolute. "Mom," he said quietly, "we need to talk, privately." Margaret looked up at him, her eyes glossy and unfocused. "Ethan, I didn't mean... It wasn't supposed to go like this." He gently helped her stand, and together they slipped into a side room connected to the ballroom, a small lounge meant for the bridal party. I lingered by the doorway, just out of sight, but close enough to hear the truth, unspooling in hushed fragments. Inside, Ethan closed the door softly and faced her. "Why?" he asked. The single word trembled with hurt. "Why would you try to humiliate her? On our wedding day?" Margaret pressed trembling fingers to her temples. "I was trying to protect you," she whispered. "From what?" Ethan's voice cracked. "From someone who loves me? From someone who treats me with kindness? From happiness?" Margaret's breath hitched. She sank onto a velvet chair, burying her face in her hands. I didn't want to lose you. I thought, if people doubted her, if she seemed unprepared or unstable, you would..." She stopped, choking on the rest. Realization struck Ethan like a blow. "You thought I'd leave her?" Margaret nodded weakly. Ethan's silence was heavier than anger. "Mom," he finally said, voice trembling but firm. "You didn't lose me to her. You pushed me away yourself." Margaret flinched at his words. Tears slipped down her cheeks, not dramatic, not manipulative this time, but raw. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know why I did it. I just panicked." Ethan stepped back, drawing a slow breath. "I love you," he said, "but I love her too. And what you did tonight crossed a line I can't ignore." Through the cracked doorway, I felt my throat tighten. For the first time, Margaret wasn't the unshakable force she pretended to be. She was simply a mother terrified of change, of losing control, of losing her son. And Ethan, standing over her, was no longer the boy who bent under her expectations. He was a man choosing his future and choosing me. The lounge door opened slowly, and Ethan stepped out first. His shoulders were tense, but his eyes held a quiet steadiness, like a decision had taken shape inside him, solid and unshakable. Margaret followed a moment later, walking carefully, her earlier bravado stripped away. She looked smaller now, fragile even. For a split second, our eyes met. There was no fury in her gaze anymore, just exhaustion and something that looked painfully close to regret. But she wasn't ready to speak to me yet. Instead, she murmured something to one of her sisters, who guided her to a quieter corner of the ballroom. The staff brought her water. Someone called a family doctor. The chaos softened, shifting from scandalous spectacle to controlled concern. Ethan approached me, stopping only when he was close enough that our foreheads almost touched. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "You don't need to apologize," I replied gently. "You didn't do anything wrong." But he shook his head. "Her actions reflect years of problems I never confronted. Maybe I didn't want to see them. Maybe I hoped she would change on her own." His voice cracked slightly, but tonight made things clear, for me, for us. I waited, letting him speak at his own pace. "I set boundaries just now," he said, "real ones, not polite suggestions she can ignore. I told her that if she wants to be part of our lives, our future, then she has to respect you, respect us. And she needs help, therapy, accountability, something to break the pattern she keeps repeating." I swallowed, both surprised and deeply moved. "How did she take it?" He exhaled. "She cried, not because she was embarrassed, but because she finally realized she crossed a line even she can't justify. She admitted she was terrified of losing me, that her control came from fear, not hate." A long silence stretched between us, soft, fragile, meaningful. "What happens now?" I finally asked. Ethan took my hands, his thumbs brushing gently across my knuckles. "Now," he said, "we start our life without letting her choices define us. And if she wants to stay in it, she'll have to earn that place." My chest tightened with emotion. "That's a big step." "It's the right one," he said firmly. His words settled into the deepest part of me. Warm, grounding, steady. For the first time since the chaos began, I felt something close to peace. Across the room, Margaret watched us. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between sorrow and acceptance. She wasn't ready to approach me, not tonight. Maybe not for a long time, but the air between us felt changed, not healed, not forgiven, but no longer toxic. "This is our wedding," Ethan said softly, turning me back toward the dance floor. "And I don't want the memory of it to be her breakdown." "Then what do you want it to be?" I asked. He smiled, small, sincere, full of promise. "I want it to be the night we chose each other, fully, completely." And in that moment, surrounded by fractured pieces finally settling into place, I knew that choice would define everything that came next. A year later, the memory of our wedding night had softened, not erased, not forgotten, but settled into something wiser, like a storm we learned to navigate, a shadow that no longer frightened us because we understood where it came from. Our marriage had grown in the spaces that chaos once cracked open, stronger, more grounded, more honest. Ethan and I had built a life that felt wholly ours. We moved into a cozy townhouse filled with sunlight, plants I kept forgetting to water, and coffee mugs that never seemed to match. We worked through challenges with patience and humor, celebrating small victories, burnt pancakes, late-night movies, messy love that felt beautifully real. Margaret, meanwhile, kept her distance, not out of spite, but out of reflection. After that night, she began therapy, a decision that shocked her relatives, but quietly impressed them too. Months passed with only polite holiday messages and occasional updates from Ethan's sister. She wasn't ready to face me. I wasn't ready either. Healing isn't instant. Sometimes it's slow, awkward, fragile. Then, on our 1-year anniversary, she reached out. A handwritten note arrived in our mailbox, neat cursive on cream-colored stationery. Ethan opened it, scanned the first few lines, then handed it to me with a quiet, unreadable expression. "I would like to see you, both of you. Only if you're willing." After a long conversation, Ethan and I agreed, so we invited her over. When she arrived, she looked different. Not physically, but in the way she held herself. Softer, less guarded. The kind of woman finally tired of fighting battles no one else could see. We sat together in our living room, sunlight streaming through the windows. Margaret folded her hands in her lap, inhaled deeply, and said, "There's something I need to confess." My breath caught. She looked at me first, not with anger, not with superiority, but with genuine remorse. "I know apologizing isn't enough," she said, "but I want to tell you the truth, the real reason I tried to sabotage your wedding." My pulse quickened. Ethan leaned forward, gripping my hand. Margaret exhaled shakily. "It wasn't because I thought you were unworthy. Not truly. It was because you reminded me of someone." "Someone?" Ethan asked. She nodded. "Your father's first love." Ethan froze. I blinked. "What do you mean?" Margaret stared down at her hands. "Before I married his father, he loved a woman who was everything I wasn't. Warm, confident, kind. He adored her. When she left town unexpectedly, he married me. He cared for me, yes. But deep down, I always feared he would have chosen differently if she had stayed." Silence fell like a curtain. "And when Ethan fell in love with you," she continued softly, "I saw her in you. The way you smiled, the way you listened, the way you made him laugh. It terrified me. I wasn't losing a son. I was reliving an old insecurity." My heart softened, not with pity, but with understanding. Margaret's eyes glistened. "Instead of healing my past, I tried to control my present, and I hurt both of you. I'm so sorry." Ethan swallowed hard, tears forming. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me this?" "Because," she whispered, "I didn't understand it myself until therapy." I reached across the table, gently touching her hand. "Margaret," I said, "your past doesn't define our future, but honesty does. And this means more than you know." Her shoulders trembled with relief. In that moment, the three of us weren't bride, groom, and difficult mother-in-law. We were simply people, scarred, flawed, healing, choosing honesty over fear. And as the afternoon light wrapped around us like a warm embrace, I realized something powerful. Our wedding night wasn't the beginning of destruction. It was the beginning of truth. And truth, messy, painful, unexpected, was the foundation we needed all along.